Now that we've seen kind of the rationale behind having an array, the next most obvious thing to look at is how do we actually go through and declare that array. So again, this is on 403, just so I can remember to continue to use the page numbers. The declaration of an array is not altogether that different than what we've already seen with the declaration of primitive data types. So the big difference you're going to see here is we're going to use the braces here, left brace, right brace, in order to declare, in this case, an integer array called numbers. So it doesn't look altogether that different than a regular declaration of an integer data type, right? The wrinkle we're going to toss in here is that these arrays should have a size, whereas it's at all possible you should declare arrays of a certain size. So here, what we're suggesting is numbers is a new integer array of size 6. So that means that there are going to be 6 integers in this particular array. What does that essentially mean? Well, this, and again, this is figure 7.2, and I do believe this is still page 403. So here's the variable, right? And that variable is of a type array. It's an integer array, and it's called numbers. Here's the big wrinkle that is going to give many of you headaches here in the beginning. We refer to each of the elements in the array by its subscript. So remember that when you're dealing with data, you start with the number 0. When you're dealing with users, you start with the number 1. So your array has 6 values in it, but the values, their subscript, so the thing it is that we call them by, is their number minus 1. So the first element in my array is 0. The second element in my array is 1. The third element in my array is 2. The fourth element in my array is 3, and so on and so forth. This leads very, very commonly to the off by 1 error, where you are either going to try to reference, element number 6 when really you meant element number 5, or you go the other way, you overcompensate and you think, okay, I want number 6 and I add 1 to it, so really I'm looking at element number 7. Well, there is no element number 7 here, and there has to be a little bit of processing magic that happens on behalf of the runtime environment to get that to go. So this is where you are going to run into potentially a little bit of issue. It's the subscript of your array, so it's minus 1. So if I'm referring to the first element, it's 0. The second element is 1. The third element is 2, and so on and so forth. You'll get the hang of it. How is it that we actually go through and declare these? There's a preferred method, and then there's a less preferred method. I'm going to show you this, and this is finally on page 404. And then I'll switch over to a replit here to show you that you can do it both ways, like the text suggests. What we're suggesting is that we have a float. It's an array of floating point numbers. It's called temperatures, and the size of that float here is 100. We have character array. It's called letters, and the size of that is 41, and so on and so forth. One note here: you can absolutely positively use final ints or final double, final float, etc. if you have a good reason to do that, and my suggestion is you probably do in a lot of cases. If you think about a calendar, if you think about a clock, if you think about the numbers you can use for a GPA, for example, those should be final because you should not have any opportunity to be able to change those. Note here, once an array is created, its size cannot be changed. We'll talk a little bit more of this later on when we look at copying arrays and some of the operations that happen there. So what this is suggesting here is, once we have created an array of integers called numbers and it is set to num elements, we cannot change that. We're going to come back to that idea later on. Here in the text, you will also see certain examples of arrays being created and accessed this way. You'll notice I have a character array called letters. I have a double array called values from file. I just needed names. And if I run this 15 minutes later, what you'll notice is that this did not send me any errors. So that means that these declarations here on line 7 and 8 are good. You'll notice we did not provide the number of values that we have loaded into here. By default, if you do not declare a size for your arrays, Java is going to give you 10 of them. Sometimes that's going to be enough, sometimes that's not going to be enough. We'll see examples as we keep going on. One more thing to notice, this is actually here in 7.1, and it's way down here at the bottom, called alternate array declaration notation. This is on page 412, but I just expanded the example here. This, line number 10, is going to create integer arrays, and it's going to create 3 of them: students, grades, and classes. This double array called students1 is the only array that's going to be created. Grades1, that was messy, grades1, and classes1, both of these will simply be single value double declarations like we've been doing this whole while. So this on line number 11, I can tell you in the homework I'm going to see at least a couple of examples of you guys getting this messed up. That's why I took extra time to do this here. Is the square braces there do make a difference where we put these. If we put those here after the int statement, this whole line number 10, says create students, grades, and classes as integer arrays. This, line number 11, simply creates students 1 as an array, and grades 1 and classes 1 are not arrays.